Alright, so here's a quick look at this new feature. This is part of 8.2D, and it's the linear gradient grabber tool. And essentially what it does is it lets you pick a new gradient, create a new gradient by simply picking the colors as you drag a line. So for instance, if I'm starting from this blue area up here, let me zoom in a little bit, right? And let's say, there you go. And then I'm dragging across. You see what colors it's picking up along that line, and you in fact see immediately what the gradient is that it's going to pick. And when you let go, you now have that as your current gradient. So if you use a tool such as circular fill, and you have it with fill settings in gradient mode, such as horizontal gradient, you'll now be drawing these same colors along that gradient. All right, let's take a look at another example. In fact, let's have the gradient visible. That would be P for the sweep editor. That's a really good way to look at it. And you know, by default you might have something a little bit different, but let's work with this and essentially load the gradient grabber. Let's choose that here, right click on the little rainbow tool here and select linear gradient grabber tool. All right, so let's say I want to grab colors going from this dark trees area all across here, but across the blue skies. And there you go. So it grabs all these colors and builds a new gradient right from that. All right, let's see some other examples. This one here is a very small photograph with some kites. And let's say I'm going to simply grab these colors. Again, that's my current selection tool. So I want to go from this one here and just grab across all of these. Bingo. All these colors that it sees along that line are being built into the gradient. Here's another example. This one's even smaller. I'm going to actually scale this to the buffer and zoom out a little bit. So there we have now sort of I think it's a water fountain. And again, we want to pick the colors. Now we might perhaps grab the colors here along this or going across it. Whatever it is you need, you can very quickly build gradients from. Let's go along this. Let's go just in the blues or in the water area here, and you see how quickly you can create new gradients with that. Let's see a last example here. That one's a tree stump that was photographed from the top down where it was cut. And so for instance, if you grab the many green values there, you get tons of colors there along the green. Let's zoom in a little bit to that and perhaps grab a more refined set of colors. And it's just really convenient to quickly grab these colors. Same on the tree, on the wood here. In fact, that's a really great way to grab similar, same set of colors. Let's say for instance here, all of these, so you could build that into perhaps sediments layer, or build a color gradient for use in a couple of other ways, other places. One thing you could do, for instance, just use the rectangle fill tool now. And again, the rectangle fill tool, you'll want to make sure the fill settings are for horizontal gradient or vertical gradient or whatever you need. But for instance, if you make this a horizontal gradient, you can now see these colors displayed inside that rectangle. And so if, let's say, you wanted to build a color picker that uses these colors, right? So I'm talking about selecting something from the green through the tree bark back to the green. Let's say I wanted all these colors in my color picker, or something like this. Well, you know what? Let's undo this. There you go. Let's go from the green in the upper right corner all across some of these browns. So what I'll do is I'll simply use the rectangle fill. There you go, and it will fill it in there. I can, in fact, I can keep the original picture, or maybe I'll cover it all like so. And in order to make this a color picker, I can simply grab this as a stored image, right from the image menu, store image copy, and then click this little color picker. And from now on, these colors that I see in this image that was stored are essentially the colors I can select with the color picker. And you see that right over here when the primary color changes. Let me move this over here. So keep an eye on the primary and secondary color. As I'm dragging around here, it's picking these colors directly from the color picker. And all it took was to grab the gradient and then store it as a rectangle fill. But whatever you do with the gradient, that's that's of course up to your imagination. There's many different tools, from particles to rectangle filler and many others that use the gradient, including linear and the circular gradient tool. Right, so you could, for instance, do this. Zoom in a little bit and simply fill it in a circular way. And if you wanted to not erase the old image underneath it, what you do is you would simply change the opacity. Oh, not here. You change the opacity on your gradient, select the opacity here, and make it go down to 0 or very low. Keep it opaque in the middle, but fade it down to fully transparent at the bottom. You could do that in a couple of ways. You can gradually fade it, right? And if you do that, then the result is like so, where you can see through it for most of it. Or if you do a more sudden change, something like this, it's mostly opaque, but then on the edge it gets a little bit transparent as well. You see that here, right? There's a little bit of transparency showing there, gradual transparency. And of course you could have the gradient go all the way here and then just very suddenly become fully transparent. And so that's where you can do some other really fun stuff with that as well. All right, so that's a quick intro for building new gradients simply with the gradient grabber. In an other video, you may have seen it called the gradient sucker tool, but that was a little bit too aggressively named. And so we now call it the linear gradient grabber tool, which allows you to grab a gradient from any images you have here. In fact, you can do that recursively and do it again, grab another one. And then go do the circular gradient tool again on that, and you see that it increases the density of these tremendously. All right, thanks for watching.